So before I get back, I'm going to do a number of videos again dealing with the in-depth medical issues that can be mistaken, well, that cause psychiatric conditions. You have to remember there's many dimensions to psychiatric conditions. There's medical aspects, social aspects, genetic aspects. I think these are all very real things. I think it's very true. The problem isn't whether or not psychiatric illnesses exist. The problem is whether psychiatry and the mental health industry are actually making people healthier, not doing anything, or making people sicker. Okay, now I'm going to go over a little bit in depth into the North Korean mental health system. Okay, right here, asking North Korean, how do North Koreans care for their mental health? Now, people are going to say, well, we do this better here. We have a better total standard of living in the United States. Not at all. Like, the main reason we have a better standard of living in the United States is because of our Enlightenment values, our liberal values that put the primacy of the individual. The state values the individual needs to value the state. We have a different way of looking at things that traces itself back to the Enlightenment and the founding of this country, that North Koreans, I mean, they do in some ways if you read the Juche ideology, but it doesn't seem to purse itself out in the way it doesn't seem to. We could be being misled, although I don't think we're being entirely misled, but we could be being misled heavily by the media. And I think to some extent we are being misled by the media. But I do think the standard of living in North Korea is, of course, far lower than that of the United States. But the reason our standard of living is so high is mostly because of technology, our embrace of technology, the fact that we are Western civilization, not Eastern civilization, and that we embrace science and modernity, and the fact that we have the primacy of the individual based on the values of the Enlightenment. Okay, that is a big difference, but we are losing that the more and more and more and more and more we put our faith in things like psychiatry and mental health, and the less and less and less we put our faith, and not our faith, it's not faith. We need to understand that things need to be ruled by reason, okay? Like Aleister Crowley stated in his book, Magic, Labor, ABA, love is the law, love under will, meaning that emotion needs to be controlled by rationality, and that is the concept of scientific illuminism, the concepts of telema. If more people understood the writings of Aleister Crowley, less people would be led astray by the mental health community. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the mental health in North Korea. So ask a North Korean. So they're saying, who comes from, okay, this is about Hyun Seung Lee, who comes from an elite North Korean family that defected, okay? So he says, does North Korean society emphasize taking care of your mental health? Lee, mental health as we understand it in South Korea or the West is an altogether different concept to that of mental health in North Korea. And this is so true based on just the concepts. You have to understand, a lot of, and he fairly says South Korea or the West, and that's because of the influence that the West has had, Western civilization has had on South Korea and other countries like Japan, etc. Japan has whole, it's an amalgamation of Western and Eastern ideologies. So in North Korea, the mental bleeds into the ideological, as it does here, as you're seeing with the LGBTQIAP++ movement, as you're seeing with the attacks by the psychiatric community on heterosexual white men, as you're seeing with books like White Fragility, which are complete horse crap, as you're seeing with these concepts pushing things like Walking While Black, which is an anti-law enforcement, anti-society mentality being pushed by Bucks County and by other organizations like NAMI and the CSP, being pushed on the citizenry of Bucks County, on the residents of Bucks County, by those that are mental health. It's a mental health related thing, and they're pushing fallacy. They're pushing ideology. They're pushing ideology over fact. So in North Korea, the mental bleeds into the ideological. If somebody has a problem with their mental health, that is seen as analogous to a problem with the person's ideology. North Korean society consistently stresses the importance of ideology. That ideology is none other than the revolutionary ideology and spirit that encompasses the party's monolithic leadership system, the Juche idea, and the spirit of defending the leader to death. Okay, according to North Korean media, if a person's mind is sick and rotten, then that person's ideologically laxed, and as a result, unable to defend North Korea's socialist system. Any mention of mental health in North Korea implies the sufferer is not revolutionary enough and lacks loyalty to the state. And I think that to an extent in this country you see that in the psychiatric community, in the mental health community, in the mental health industry. You see it bleeding through, primarily through the influx of cultural Marxism into academia into the school systems, and meaning the lower level school systems, and academia into mental health, and the lower school systems acting as indoctrination. And if you don't meet the indoctrination standards, well, then it's off to the mental health farm for you. North Korean news: how does North Korea deal with mental health issues like depression? Mr. Lee says, I don't think I've ever heard the term depression while I was living in North Korea. If the concept exists, then it's not something that's often talked about by citizens, let alone by the medical community. It was when when I started watching South Korean dramas and reading South Korean news. Now, this is the thing. What you have to understand, this is part of in South Korea and the West, this is part of our perverse ideology, to convince everybody that they have some sort of a mental defect, that everybody's depressed and everybody has a mental problem. And so he saw this watching the dramas. Well, this is so ingrained in our culture that it's part of our propaganda. Okay, that's what you need to understand. It is a part of our propaganda. If you notice, when I was doing my videos on my videos, James Clark bullshitting about Tung Soo-do, there was a movie, a television series about the Hwarang Warriors, and it depicted the Hwarang Warriors as metrosexual and bisexual and like very effeminate, and that's bizarre to say the least, but it's also most likely historically inaccurate that the Hwarang Knights were in touch with their feminine side and metrosexual and bisexual and stuff. Not probably reality, but that is what's in the media, in the South Korean media, to push this, that this is okay, this is normal, this is fine. So North Korean news asks, South Korea has issues with depression, suicide, etc. In your experience, do North Koreans have more or less mental health issues than South Koreans? I would say what you see here is, if you see these things happening in North Korea, it's due to the depressed living standards. But Mr. Lee says, in his opinion, North Koreans enjoy better mental health. So they enjoy better mental health than South Koreans. North Koreans may also suffer from a lot of stress, but they do not easily fall into depression and commit suicide as a result. So Mr. Lee is explaining North Koreans that are not propagandized with this mentality of everybody's depressed and everybody needs to be happy, and if you're not happy, there's something wrong with you, and if you're not an effeminate guy, there's something wrong with you. He's saying that North Koreans actually enjoy a better state of mental health than do the South Koreans, and if they do suffer stress, they don't go and kill themselves. So no doubt it's possible that North Koreans don't talk about it because they have no concept of depression, and we might be led to think that fewer people have such problems. But it takes considerable mental fortitude to scrape by in a society without basic freedoms and human rights. In North Korea, it's viewed as obligatory for party members and citizens to train themselves mentally and ideologically, so ordinary people have no room to think of their own lives in such negative terms because they must embrace the Juche ideology. Suicide is considered an anti-state behavior. In North Korea, from the standpoint of North Korean authorities, the country has become a socialist paradise and on earth under the party's rule. As a result, suicide is interpreted as a statement of discontent with the policies of the state and party. Now, what I want people to understand, I'm not saying that North Koreans do not receive other propaganda. I think we all know they do. But they're not getting the continuous soft propaganda. I guarantee you're not going to see North Koreans bombarded on their television. Hell, I don't even think many of them have televisions, but you're not going to see them bombarded with a gazillion Zoloft commercials and other commercials about different medicines to ask their doctors about and crap, and insisting that they might have this problem or that problem, and you're not going to see them Googling things and getting all worked up that they might have autism spectrum disorder or what have you, you know. If you're as old as I am, think about life in the 80s or the 90s. I think people were actually a hell of a lot less stressed because we were still being attacked by this soft propaganda, but it was nowhere near as extreme. So North Korean news, do they have therapists in North Korea? Lee, in North Korea, they do not have therapists. Oh, thank God. You don't find therapists in any North Korean hospital, not even in special medical facilities catering to the upper elite, such as Namsan Hospital in Panggwa Clinic. North Korean news. South Koreans often use the English word stress. Does North Korea have this word or concept, or a concept similar to it? In North Korea, there is no such word or concept as stress. Perhaps these days more people are coming to know of stress and depression through South Korean dramas. You can't take time off work or go to a resort to recover because of stress or depression in North Korea. North Korean resorts are mostly open only to mid to high-level cadres anyway, not the general public. Most North Koreans rely on alcohol and cigarettes to deal with stress. If somebody's psychological state becomes particularly severe, they may be treated as a mental patient and sent to a mental hospital. That would basically mean the end of that person's life. From what I know, from what this gentleman knows, he says these people aren't accorded treatment benefiting hospital patients or even human beings. North Korean news says, while you were in North Korea, did you hear anything about people with serious mental illnesses such as schizophrenia or blah, blah, blah? And he says, yes, he did hear about people with schizophrenia. There was a trading company director he knew who was forcibly sent to a mental hospital. A doctor from Pyongyang Medical University once told me about mental hospitals in North Korea. People who suffer from severe mental illnesses such as schizophrenia are sent to them. Each province has one, so each province does have one, such as the number 49 hospital. They are quite notorious among North Korean people. Now, back in the day, we used to have, like, our state hospitals were very notorious. If you messed up, people would say, you're going to go to Byberry. You're going to go to Byberry, which was the Philadelphia State Hospital at Byberry, which was in Penn Salem, right down the road from it. Okay. I also, now, and that's the thing, people that are saying, oh, this is na-da-da-da-da, it wasn't that long ago, in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, the people were being treated horrifically and still are being treated horrifically in mental asylums in the U.S. It hasn't changed, okay? It's just now more people are being abused outpatient as well. So this person says he also heard about an incident where a family member of a high-ranking cadre was to undergo punishment for corruption. The cadre had that family member stripped from the family registry and sent to a mental hospital in order to shield themselves from fallout. The purpose of North Korean mental asylums is to shut away mental patients whose abnormal behavior is considered damaging to North Korean society. So what you see here is this person was suspected of corruption. Here, when somebody's suspected by corruption, they get a promotion, apparently. Moving forward. 6 facts about mental health in North Korea. Number 1, a medical problem misdiagnosed as a political one. Here you have medical problems misdiagnosed as mental health problems. Social problems misdiagnosed as mental problems. Existential problems misdiagnosed as mental problems. Okay, if you don't know what's causing the problem, what's causing the symptoms, you can't do anything about the symptoms. You can't treat the symptoms if you don't know what's causing them. So among both elites and those in poverty, mental health conditions in North Korea tend to go untreated, and there are no counselors and psychotherapists. Instead of clinically treating mental health in North Korea with counseling, compatriots view those who have mental health issues as dissidents who are disloyal to North Korean ideology. As a result of this stigmatization, mental health is a very taboo topic in North Korean society. Number 49 hospitals, although North Korea does not utilize psychiatry or counseling to treat mental illness, those deemed mentally ill are placed in number 49 hospitals upon the family's request. These facilities practice antiquated treatments such as insulin shock therapy, where staff members inject subjects with high doses of insulin in order to create a coma-like state that lasts for days. The stigmas surrounding 49 inhabitants also cause North Korean society to brand these individuals as outcasts. As a result of this, families with relatives in 49 facilities often lose socio-political status due to stigmas. Defectors trauma. According to Dan Cook, now you're going to see, this is what they're calling, so you have to understand, there are mental health symptoms such as anxiety, hallucination. There's real psychiatric, I would say, mental health symptoms. When you turn a mental health symptom or a cluster of symptoms into a diagnosis, you'll see that it becomes a load of horse shit. So they're going to talk about defectors trauma here. There's other things. There's no more evidence for these quote-unquote mental illnesses than there are for the mental illnesses we call mental illnesses. They're just symptom clusters. It depends on what you're classifying as a mental illness. So, let's see here. National Medical Center psychiatrist So-hee Lee's October 2020 study, Trauma History and Mental Health of North Korean Defectors. Only 5% of North Korean defectors did not have exposure to trauma when in North Korea. I would guarantee you everybody has exposure to some trauma. The most common types of trauma stemmed from witnessing government executions, enduring starvation, starvation-related deaths of family and friends, witnessing extreme physical assaults, escaping arrest following defection. North Korean defectors also struggle with assimilating into South Korean society. Long-term effects of the arduous march, North Korean famine. This is the problem. When you have ridiculously horrendous nutritional deficiencies, this affects the brain, nervous system, and other organ systems of the body, causing psychiatric symptoms. The international aid given to North Koreans during the arduous march also directly undermined the North Korean government's claims of self-reliance and complete isolation. However, its effect on mental health are long-term, with these traumatic experiences linked to drug addiction and mental illness among North Koreans. For example, Lee Kwon-hyung, a researcher from the Seoul-based database Center for the North Korean Human Rights, estimated that 30% of North Koreans used drugs as of 2016, with methamphetamine and opioids the most common due to its appetite-suppressing properties. Methamphetamine usage spiked during North Korea's 1990 famine. Malnourishment's effects on the brains. This is what you need to understand. A lot of people that are homeless are concurrently experiencing psychiatric symptoms. And when I go back into the medical aspects of mental health and a bunch of other videos that I'm going to do with this, you're going to understand why. I mean, a lot of mental health psychiatric symptoms are caused by medical issues. They're also caused by other things in the environment that aren't related. They don't affect the biology, but they do because they affect the individual, such as extreme stress. Okay, our body is adapted to live in a world that is not this world. Our body is adapted to live in an agrarian world or a hunter-gatherer type world. It's not adapted to live in an office work world. So this extreme food insecurity also has extremely damaging effects on mental health and brain development. For example, malnourishment is linked to mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and concentration difficulties. There's this chick, oh geez, oh man, that skinny little North Korean defector girl, Yeonmi Park. I like Yeonmi Park. I encourage people to like Yeonmi Park. I disagree with Yeonmi Park many things. Okay? Many things disagree with Yeonmi Park, but damn, she look good. Yeonmi Park look very, very good. Okay? And the thing is, yeah, you know, must be all the grasshoppers she ate, like she said in the video. So, organization that aims to help due to its isolationist nature. Organizations outside of North Korea cannot provide mental health counseling to North Korean citizens living in North Korea. However, there are groups such as Crossing Borders that give assistance to North Korea. There's some Jesus group that gives a bunch of crap, bunch of stuff to North Korea. You have to remember, Kim Il-sung, basically the founding father of North Korea, his parents were actually Christian missionaries. People don't know that. I'm going to do a series of videos on Juche, I think. I'm actually a fan of Juche. I think there's a lot we can learn from Juche. Particularly white Americans can learn from Juche. North Korea's failure to... Okay, moving forward. So, this was a diagnosis that I was diagnosed with as a Ute. Okay, as my cousin Vinny would say, a Ute. So, even the best behaved children can be difficult and challenging at times, but oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD, includes a frequent and ongoing pattern of anger, irritability, arguing, and defiance towards parents and other authority figures. Okay? Now, what they're not taking into consideration is what's actually causing this. Could it be your upbringing? My behavior more or less regulated when I got the hell out of my household. ODD also includes being spiteful and seeking revenge, a behavior called vindictiveness. These emotional and behavioral issues cause serious problems with family life. Now, what you got to understand here, being spiteful and vindictiveness, this is their way of saying that if you're wronged and you seek justice, you're mentally ill. Keep that in mind. These emotional and behavioral issues cause serious problems with family life, social activities, blah, 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 blah. Symptoms. Often easily loses temper, is frequently touchy and easily annoyed by others, is often angry and resentful, often argues with adults or people in authority, often actively defies or refuses to follow adults' requests or rules, often annoys or upsets people on purpose, often blames others for their own mistakes or misbehaviors, says mean and hateful things when upset, tries to hurt the feelings of others and seeks revenge. A lot of these are behaviors in therapists. Okay? If I was in the mood, if I was in the diagnosing position, I could diagnose my former therapist with oppositional defiant disorder if she was a kid right now, based on all the crap, okay, like arguing, blah, 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 actively defies or refuses, often annoys or upsets people on purpose. She has done that in my sessions. Often blames others for their mistakes, vicarious trauma, says mean and hateful things. Maybe you have an autism spectrum disorder. Tries to hurt the feelings of others. There you go. Has shown vindictive behavior at least twice in the past 6 months. Jesus Christ. If she was a child, she'd have ODD. Mild symptoms occur only in one setting. Moderate, severe, yada, yada, yada. But what I'm going to go here is show you this. So, ridiculously enough, so what's dysesthesia ethiopica? Okay, so in psychiatry, dysesthesia Ethiopia, or literally Ethiopian bad feeling, or black bad feeling, was an alleged mental illness. There is no more proof for oppositional defiant disorder than there is for Ethiopian bad feeling. Do you understand that? You will. So, described by American physician Samuel A. Cartwright in 1851, which proposed a theory for the cause of laziness among slaves, today, dysesthesia ethiopica is not recognized as a disease, but instead considered an example of pseudoscience. Maybe every diagnosis in the DSM should be considered an example of pseudoscience. Did anybody consider that? And part of the edifice of scientific racism. Maybe oppositional defiant disorder is part of scientific ageism. So found exclusively among African Americans. So you can read this on your own, kind of like hysteria in women. Okay. Drapetomania was a supposed mental illness that in 1851 American physician Samuel A. Cartwright hypothesized as the cause of enslaved Africans fleeing captivity. This hypothesis centered around the belief that slavery was such an improvement upon the lives of slaves that only those suffering from some form of mental illness would wish to escape. This has to do with people that refuse treatment or don't want treatment or are afraid of psychiatric treatment. The theory is that only a mentally ill person, you're mentally ill because you don't want psychiatric treatment. There's no more proof for drapetomania than there are other psychiatric illnesses. Sluggish schizophrenia was a diagnostic category used in the Soviet Union, characterized by slowly progressive course. It was diagnosed even in patients who showed no symptoms of schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders, on the assumption that these symptoms would appear later. Sluggish schizophrenia was the most infamous of diagnoses. Okay, so it has never been used or recognized outside the Soviet Union or by the World Health Organization. It was developed by this dude Andrei Snezov, whatever, and his colleagues. Okay, moving forward, again, no more evidence for sluggish schizophrenia than there is other things. These are symptom clusters. Moving forward. Hysteria is a term used colloquially. So hysteria is a form used colloquially to mean ungovernable emotional excess and can refer to a temporary state of mind or emotion. In the 19th century, female hysteria was considered a diagnosable physical illness in women. It was assumed that the basis of diagnosis operated under the belief that women are predisposed to mental and behavioral conditions, and interpretation of sex-related differences in stress response. In the 20th century, it shifted to being considered a mental illness. Many influential people, such as Sigmund Freud and Jean-Martin Charcot, dedicated research to hysterical patients. Currently, most doctors practicing medicine do not accept hysteria as a medical diagnosis. Most doctors do not accept it. Some still do. The blanket diagnosis of hysteria has been fragmented into a myriad of medical categories such as epilepsy, histrionic personality disorder, conversion disorder, dissociative disorders, or other medical conditions. Furthermore, lifestyle choices such as choosing not to be wed are no longer considered symptoms of psychological disorders. Now, xenophobia is not yet considered a mental illness, although I was diagnosed with it. I don't believe it's in the DSM, but I was diagnosed with xenophobia. I don't believe it's actually in the DSM, but I might be the one lone person diagnosed with it by a doctor from somewhere in Africa, I think Liberia, that didn't like me, okay? Because I insisted on having a doctor that could speak and understand English. He didn't like me. Xenophobia, strange foreign alien, is the fear or dislike of anything which is perceived as being foreign or strange. It is an expression which is based on the perception that a conflict exists between an in-group and an out-group, and it may manifest itself as suspicion of one group's activities by members of another group. So this is a way of saying you don't like my group of people or the group of people that society prefers. You're mentally ill. You're not an ally of BLM. You're mentally ill. You don't think that the country should be flooded with non-white immigrants and the culture and genetic nature of the stock should be changed. You're mentally ill. Okay? If you differ in opinion on things, you're mentally ill. Again, as far as I know, I don't own a DSM-5, but as far as I know, homophobia is not yet considered a mental illness, but it probably will be soon. Homophobia encompasses a range of negative attitudes and feelings towards homosexuality or people who are identified or perceived as being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. It has been defined as contempt, prejudice, aversion, hatred, or antipathy, may be based on irrational fear and may sometimes be related to religious beliefs. So this is their way of saying you're religious, you're mentally ill. Homophobia, there are, in fact, in Europe, the Holy Bible, the holy book of Christianity, the Old and New Testament, and the Quran, the holy book of Islam, have homophobic warnings and anti-Semitic warnings on them. So what they want you to know is they want you to know that the Holy Bible and the Quran, so this is showing you you don't really have freedom of religion, okay? Because if the Holy Bible and the Holy Quran are coming with a warning label that says these books are anti-Semitic and homophobic, no, they're religious books. Homophobia is observable in critical and hostile behavior such as discrimination and violence on the basis of sexual orientations that are non-heterosexual. Recognized types of homophobia include institutionalized homophobia, religious homophobia, and state-sponsored homophobia, and internalized homophobia experienced by people who have same-sex attractions regardless of how they identify. So regardless of how you slice it, you're probably homophobic. Moving forward. Now, this isn't the end-all be-all, but one of the answers to psychiatry's issues and the mental health industry's issues is the biopsychosocial model. The problem is actually implementing it and not just talking out your ass and going back to a repressive form of treatment, so-called treatment, which was done with me, okay? My therapist was a big believer in the biopsychosocial model. In her head, in reality, she believed in an oppressive form of treatment, which has been practiced from the beginning of time, and a blaming form of treatment, trying to blame the client and trying to, and in fact siding with people that were harassing, stalking, and threatening the client based on her prejudices, and as did her organization, which shows that despite her saying that she adopted the biopsychosocial model, she did not. So biopsychosocial models are a class of transdisciplinary models that look at interconnection between biology, psychology, and socio-environmental factors. According to so history, current status of the beat. Okay, so the biopsychosocial model, what you got to see is they proposed 3 clarifications to the model and identified 7 established principles. Now, this goes back similarly to the Maslowian hierarchy of needs. So you have self-awareness, active cultivation of trust. She failed in every one of these. An emotional style characterized by empathetic curiosity, self-collaboration as a way to reduce bias, educating the emotions to assist with diagnosis and forming therapeutic relationships, using informed intuition, communicating clinical evidence to foster dialogue, not just the mechanical application of protocol. Now, the problem with this is, in mental health, a lot of the so-called evidence, everything is evidence-based. As I showed in a previous video, something called RAP, Mary Ellen Copeland's RAP, the evidence was very suspicious that it was factual. A lot of it was done by the RAP organ. There was a lot of problems with it. Now, let me see here. I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to delve deeper into the medical and physiological basis of mental health issues in my later videos regarding this.